let's talk about it. We all notice it, even if we don't always talk about it out loud. The price of everyday things creeping up, sometimes so slowly we barely register it, until suddenly it feels like everything costs more. You've probably felt it, that sting at the checkout when your weekly shop costs more than it did last year. Maybe you find yourself double-checking the receipt, wondering if you bought something extra, or if prices really have jumped that much. Or when filling up your car and the numbers on the pump just keep climbing. It's not just groceries, fuel, energy, and even your favorite snacks seem to be getting pricier. We hear inflation on the news, usually with a worried politician or economist. It's a word that gets thrown around a lot, often sounding technical or even a bit scary. But inflation isn't just a distant concept. It's right there in your morning coffee, your train ticket, and that loaf of bread. It's woven into the fabric of our daily routines, affecting what we buy and how we live. It shapes our decisions, whether to buy a new sofa, book a holiday, or ask for a pay rise. Even small changes in prices can make us rethink our plans or adjust our budgets. The headlines scream about the cost of living crisis, and we all feel the squeeze. It's not just numbers on a page, it's real and it's personal. But what if a little inflation isn't the villain we think? What if, managed well, it's actually good for us? Could it be that rising prices in moderation help keep our economy healthy and moving forward? It sounds strange, but let's pull back the curtain and see what inflation really is. Let's challenge some assumptions and look at the bigger picture. We'll explore why governments aim for a bit of it and how it can help an economy tick along. There's more to inflation than meets the eye, so let's get into it and discover what's really going on. Right, let's break it down. Inflation is a word you hear all the time, but what does it really mean for you and your wallet? Let's take a closer look at how it works in everyday life. Inflation is the rate at which prices for goods and services rise and the value of money falls. In other words, over time your money buys you less than it did before. Imagine last year, 20 pounds bought you 5 loaves of bread, cheese, and milk. You could fill your basket without thinking twice. This year, it buys less. Maybe you have to put something back, or you notice your basket isn't as full as it used to be. Your money hasn't changed, but what it can buy has. That's inflation in action. Your purchasing power is shrinking, even if your income stays the same. Inflation isn't about one or two things getting pricier. It's a general trend across the whole economy. It affects everything from groceries to bus fares, rent, and even your morning coffee. Economists track this with a giant imaginary shopping basket of thousands of everyday items. This basket represents what an average person might buy in a year. If the basket's total cost goes up by 2% in a year, that's 2% inflation. It's a simple way to measure how much more expensive life is getting. Over decades, inflation changes the value of everything. What seemed expensive years ago might look cheap today, and the cycle keeps repeating. That's why saving cash under your mattress is risky. Its value erodes over time. The same amount of money will buy you less and less as years go by. If inflation is 3%, your income needs to rise by at least that much to keep up. Otherwise, you're effectively earning less, even if your paycheck looks the same. If it doesn't, you're falling behind. Your bills, groceries, and daily expenses keep climbing, but your money doesn't stretch as far. It's like running on a treadmill that keeps speeding up. You have to work harder just to stay in the same place. That's the central tension of inflation, the constant push and pull between your money and the rising cost of living. Here's the twist. You'd think zero inflation is ideal, but central banks actually aim for a small, steady rate, about 2%. Why? Because a little inflation encourages people and businesses to spend and invest, not hoard cash. If everyone waits for lower prices, demand collapses, businesses suffer, and jobs are lost. A gentle rise in prices keeps money moving and economies healthy. Too much inflation is a problem, but so is none at all. That 2% target is the Goldilocks zone. Not too hot, not too cold. It's a delicate balance, but it keeps the economy moving forward. That's why a bit of inflation is actually the goal. So, why do economists like a little inflation? There are actually some good reasons. Let's break down the four main ones that make a bit of inflation not just tolerable, but actually helpful for the economy. First, it encourages spending and investment. People are more likely to buy now, not later, because waiting means prices might go up. This keeps businesses busy, helps stores sell their products, and keeps people in jobs. When consumers and companies feel confident to spend, the whole economy gets a boost, creating a positive cycle of growth. Second, a bit of inflation gives central banks room to cut interest rates in tough times, which is a powerful tool for fighting recessions. If inflation is too low, central banks have less flexibility to respond to economic slowdowns. With some inflation, they can lower rates to encourage borrowing and investment when the economy needs a lift. Third, inflation makes it easier to pay off debt. As prices and wages rise, the real value of what you owe shrinks over time, making debts less burdensome for families, businesses, and even governments. As wages gradually increase, fixed payments like mortgages or student loans become easier to manage. What once felt like a big monthly bill can become more manageable as your income rises, even if the payment stays the same. This helps not just individual borrowers, but also governments with large debts. Over time, inflation can make those big numbers less intimidating, easing the pressure on public finances and allowing for more flexibility in budgets. Fourth, modest inflation helps wages adjust. In a world without inflation, companies might have to cut pay during tough times, which can hurt morale and productivity. Instead of cutting pay, companies can freeze wages while inflation quietly reduces their real value. This way, businesses can control costs without the shock of actual pay cuts, making transitions smoother for everyone. It's less painful than layoffs and helps businesses survive tough times. By making small adjustments, companies can keep more people employed and weather economic storms together. These reasons show why a bit of inflation can actually help keep the economy stable and resilient, supporting growth and protecting jobs. It's not just a sneaky trick, it's a tool for smoother adjustments, helping the economy adapt to change without sudden shocks. But as always, it needs to be managed carefully. Too much inflation can cause chaos, while too little can stall growth. Too much or too little, and the system wobbles. Striking the right balance is key to a healthy economy. That's why central banks watch it so closely, using all their tools and expertise to keep inflation in check. A little inflation, used wisely, can be our friend, helping us grow, adapt, and build a stronger, more stable economy for everyone. Here's where inflation turns from friend to foe. All those benefits rely on one thing: your wages rising as fast as prices. If inflation is 2% and your pay rises by 3%, you're ahead. But if prices jump by 7% and your pay barely moves, you're falling behind, fast. Suddenly, your money buys less and covering basics becomes a struggle. This hits hardest for those on low or fixed incomes. Their budgets are wrecked, and savings vanish just to get by. Inflation widens the gap between rich and poor. Those with assets are protected, wage earners are exposed. When pay can't keep up, inflation becomes a corrosive force, eroding financial security. That's the dark side behind the numbers. If rising prices hurt, falling prices, deflation, must be great, right? Not so fast. When prices drop, people delay spending, waiting for even better deals. If everyone waits, demand collapses, shops can't sell, and businesses cut jobs. This triggers a vicious cycle: falling prices, lower profits, layoffs, and even less spending. Japan's lost decades show how hard it is to escape deflation. People stopped spending, businesses stopped investing, and the economy stagnated. Governments tried everything: zero interest rates, massive spending, but breaking the cycle was nearly impossible. Deflation sounds good, but it can grind an economy to a halt. It's a trap that's tough to escape. So while we complain about rising prices, the alternative can be far worse. A little inflation is far healthier than a downward spiral. That's why economists fear deflation even more than inflation. It's a lesson we can't afford to forget. But what if inflation goes wild? Enter hyperinflation, when prices double every month, week, or even day. Money becomes worthless, and chaos follows. Zimbabwe in the 2000s is a classic example. The government printed money, but goods didn't increase, so prices exploded. At its peak, prices doubled every 24 hours. People rushed to spend wages before they lost value. Banknotes for trillions couldn't buy bread. Savings vanished, pensions evaporated, and the economy collapsed. People bartered for basics, trust in money and government disappeared, and society unraveled. Venezuela faced a similar disaster. Hyperinflation drove millions to flee, and savings became worthless. These stories are warnings. Inflation is useful but dangerous if unchecked. Once it spirals, it's almost impossible to control. Hyperinflation destroys economies and lives. That's why central banks are so cautious. A little inflation is a tool, too much is a fire. Handle with care. So, is inflation friend or foe? It's both. The real story is about balance. Like medicine, the right dose keeps economies healthy, but too much or too little is dangerous. Policymakers aim for that just right 2%, keeping the economy moving without overheating. But the key is making sure everyone benefits, not just the wealthy. Wages must keep pace with prices for prosperity to be shared. When they do, we all rise together. When they don't, inflation leaves many behind. Think of inflation as a tide. A gentle rise lifts all boats, but a tidal wave or a receding tide can wreck lives. Next time you hear about inflation, ask, is everyone's boat rising? Because inflation only works if it works for all of us. That's the real measure of a healthy economy.